Take a deep breath because what I'm about to share with you will change everything about how you see this moment in your life. And as you listen to these words, you might begin to realize that every great success story begins exactly where you are right now, doesn't it? I'm curious about which part of you already knows that this rejection, this setback, this moment that feels so heavy right now is actually the exact catalyst that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary achievers. And you might wonder how quickly you'll recognize that the same fire burning in your chest right now burned in Michael Jordan when he was cut from his high school basketball team. The same feeling that consumed Oprah Winfrey when she was fired from her first television job and told she was unfit for television. The same energy that coursed through Steven Spielberg when he was rejected from USC Film School 3 times. Have you ever noticed how the most powerful diamonds are created under the most intense pressure? Well, speaking to yourself right now, you can begin to understand that pressure creates champions. And as you continue to feel whatever you're feeling in this moment, you're actually experiencing the birth pains of your greatest achievements, aren't you? The question isn't whether this rejection will make you stronger, but how magnificently strong you're willing to become. And I don't know if you've realized yet how this very moment is writing the first chapter of your comeback story. But those who understand greatness recognize that every champion has a moment where they must choose between giving up or leveling up. And something tells me you're the kind of person who chooses to level up. You already know what it feels like to win, don't you? Think about a time when you succeeded at something important, when you overcame a challenge, when you proved to yourself that you had what it takes. And as you remember that feeling, that sense of accomplishment, that knowing that you are capable of extraordinary things, you might begin to realize that this same winning essence lives inside you right now, waiting to be activated by your decision to refuse to let anyone else determine your worth. I'm not going to tell you to feel grateful for this rejection, but isn't it interesting how every story of undeniable success includes a chapter where someone said no, where doors slammed shut, where the world seemed to turn its back, and those who went on to achieve greatness understood that these moments weren't endings, but beginnings, weren't defeats, but redirections towards something far greater than they had originally imagined. What would happen if you decided right now that this rejection was actually the universe's way of telling you that you're destined for something bigger, something better, something that will make this moment seem like the greatest gift you ever received? Because when you really think about it, every lottery winner had to buy a ticket. And if you've won before in your life, if you've achieved anything meaningful, then you already have the winning ticket inside you. You already know how to identify as someone who overcomes, someone who persists, someone who transforms setbacks into comebacks. Colonel Sanders was rejected 1,009 times before someone said yes to his chicken recipe. And as you consider that story, you might wonder how many times you're willing to hear no before you create your own yes. Because the sooner you realize that their no is not your truth, the sooner you'll discover that your worth isn't determined by their decision, but by your decision to become undeniable. You don't have to believe me right now, but imagine for a moment that 5 years from today, you're standing exactly where you dreamed of being, and as you look back on this moment, this rejection, this apparent setback, you realize it was the precise moment your real journey began, the exact catalyst that forced you to dig deeper, work harder, and discover strengths you never knew you possessed. Have you realized yet how every master was once a disaster, how every expert was once a beginner, how every champion was once someone who refused to quit when quitting seemed like the only option? Well, that's exactly who you are right now. standing at the crossroads between ordinary and extraordinary, and I'm getting the impression that you're the kind of person who chooses extraordinary, aren't you? The truth is, they didn't reject you. They rejected their limited understanding of your potential. And because their vision is limited, your vision must be unlimited. Your commitment must be unshakable. Your resolve must be unbreakable. And when you really understand this, when this truth settles deep into your bones, you'll realize that their rejection was actually their gift to you, their way of saying you're too big for this space, too powerful for this opportunity, too destined for greatness to settle for their small thinking. A person can choose to see rejection as evidence of their inadequacy or as proof of their potential. And you might find that the most successful people in history chose the second option, that they understood rejection as redirection, setbacks as setups, and failures as first attempts in learning. And that's perfectly fine because that's exactly what you're choosing right now, isn't it? You may not be aware yet of how this very moment is programming your unconscious mind for unprecedented success. But as you continue to breathe, as you continue to exist in this space between where you were and where you're going, your inner champion is awakening. Your dormant greatness is stirring. Your unbreakable spirit is rising. And the version of you that will look back on this moment with gratitude is already being born. I suggest you remember that Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper because he lacked imagination and had no good ideas, if that's okay with you. And perhaps you might consider that every no you receive is simply clearing the path for your inevitable yes, because your unconscious mind already knows that you're not just someone who gets knocked down. You're someone who gets back up stronger, wiser, more determined than before. What's it like when you realize that every great athlete, every successful entrepreneur, every person who has ever achieved something meaningful has stood exactly where you're standing right now, feeling exactly what you're feeling right now, facing the same choice you're facing right now, and they chose to let their rejection fuel their resurrection, their setback fuel their comeback, their pain fuel their gain. Because the moment you realize that this isn't happening to you, it's happening for you, everything changes. And as that realization settles into every cell of your being, you might begin to understand that you're not a victim of circumstances. You're a creator of circumstances, not someone life happens to, but someone who happens to life. You could, if you wanted to, decide right now that this rejection was the best thing that ever happened to you, that it woke up the sleeping giant within you, that it activated the part of you that refuses to accept limitations, that it ignited the fire that will burn so brightly that everyone who said no will wonder how they ever doubted you. And when that happens, and it will happen, you'll remember this moment as the turning point, the catalyst, the beginning of everything extraordinary that followed. The question isn't whether you have what it takes, because you've already proven that you do every time you've overcome something difficult. Every time you've achieved something meaningful, every time you've refused to give up when giving up seemed easier, right? The real question is how magnificently you're going to demonstrate what you're made of now that you've been given this perfect opportunity to show the world and yourself what true resilience looks like. I'm telling myself to remember that every expert was once a beginner, every pro was once an amateur, every icon was once an unknown, and you might wonder how quickly you'll transform from someone who was rejected into someone who is undeniable, someone whose success is so evident, so powerful, so inspiring that the very people who said no will study your story to understand how greatness is born from the ashes of apparent defeat. Speaking of transformations, isn't it interesting how a caterpillar must completely dissolve must literally fall apart before it becomes a butterfly. And as you consider this natural process of breakdown leading to breakthrough, you might begin to recognize that you're in your cocoon moment right now, that beautiful space where everything seems dark and uncertain, but where the most miraculous transformations occur, where ordinary becomes extraordinary, where the impossible becomes inevitable. You're probably noticing that something inside you is shifting as you listen to these words, aren't you? And that shift is your recognition that you are not your circumstances. You are not what happened to you. You are not their decision about you. You are the unlimited potential that exists within you, the unbreakable spirit that has carried you through everything you've faced before and will carry you through this and into the extraordinary future that's waiting for you to claim it. That makes sense, doesn't it? Because when you really think about it, every person who has ever achieved anything great has had moments where they had to choose between the story others were trying to write for them and the story they were determined to write for themselves. And something tells me that you're choosing to write your own story, that you're choosing to be the author of your own destiny, that you're choosing to let this moment be the first sentence of the most incredible chapter of your life. Here's an interesting thing about champions. They don't become champions because everything was easy. They become champions because when everything got hard, when everyone doubted them, when every door seemed to close, they found a way to open windows, to create opportunities, to transform obstacles into stepping stones. And as you embrace this championship mindset, you might begin to realize that you've been training for this moment your entire life, that every challenge you faced has been preparing you for this opportunity to demonstrate what you're truly made of. Let me ask you this. If you knew with absolute certainty that this rejection was actually the universe's way of redirecting you towards something infinitely better than what you thought you wanted, how would you feel right now? Well, the truth is, you can choose to feel that way regardless of certainty. Because those who achieve greatness don't wait for guarantees. They create certainties through their unwavering commitment to their vision, their relentless pursuit of excellence, their absolute refusal to let anyone else's opinion become their reality. On another note, have you ever considered that every lottery winner had to first see themselves as someone who could win the lottery? That they had to identify with the possibility before the possibility became reality. And if you've ever won anything in your life, if you've ever achieved any goal, if you've ever overcome any obstacle, then you already know what it feels like to be a winner. You already have the neural pathways of success wired into your brain. You already possess the identity of someone who turns dreams into reality. Your unconscious mind already knows that this rejection is not your final destination, but your launching pad, not your period, but your comma, not your ending, but your beginning. And as this knowing moves from your unconscious to your conscious awareness, you might find yourself feeling an incredible sense of excitement about what's coming next, about who you're becoming, about the story you're about to write with your life. I can sense that you're beginning to understand that the pain you're feeling right now is not the pain of defeat, but the pain of growth, not the ache of failure, but the stretch marks of expansion, not the sorrow of ending, but the labor pains of a new beginning. And those who recognize this truth for what it is, use that pain as fuel, as motivation, as the driving force that propels them toward achievements they never thought possible. How does it feel knowing that this very moment, this conversation, these words are changing the trajectory of your entire life? That you're going to look back on this as the day you stopped letting others determine your worth and started determining your own value, the day you stopped asking for permission and started granting yourself authority, the day you stopped hoping for opportunities and started creating them. People who understand resilience tend to see setbacks as setups, rejections as redirections, and failures as first attempts in learning. And isn't it interesting how your experience right now is teaching you something invaluable about your own strength, your own character, your own capacity to rise again, no matter how many times you've been knocked down? I know you're wondering how this is all going to unfold, how this moment of apparent defeat will transform into your greatest victory. And the beautiful truth is that it begins with your decision right now to refuse to let this define you, to use it to refine you, to let it remind you of who you really are beneath all the doubts and fears and other people's opinions. Wouldn't you agree that every person who has ever achieved something extraordinary has had to face the moment where they either surrender to circumstances or surrender circumstances to their will? Where they either accept limitations or create possibilities, where they either become victims of their situation or victors over their situation. And as you stand in this powerful moment of choice, you might begin to realize that you're not just choosing how to respond to this rejection, you're choosing who you're going to become. By the way, there's something magical that happens when a person decides that no one else gets to write their story. When they claim full authorship of their life, when they refuse to let anyone else's no become their final answer, and that magic is already beginning to work in your life, already starting to attract the people and opportunities and circumstances that will support your vision, your goals, your determination to become undeniable. As you continue to process these words, as you continue to feel whatever you're feeling, you're also beginning to feel something else rising within you, something powerful and unstoppable and completely aligned with your highest potential. And that something is your refusal to quit, your commitment to excellence, your absolute determination to prove to yourself and everyone else that you are exactly who you've always known yourself to be. A winner, a champion, a person who transforms setbacks into comebacks and rejections into resurrections. The sooner you embrace the truth that this rejection was actually protection, redirecting you away from something that wasn't worthy of your talents towards something that is, the sooner you'll begin to see this entire experience as the gift it really is, the push you needed, the wake-up call that activated your greatness, the catalyst that transformed you from someone who hoped for success into someone who created it. That reminds me of a story about a young man who was told he had no talent for writing, that he should find another profession, that he would never make it as an author. And that young man was Stephen King, who went on to sell over 350 million books worldwide. And as you think about his story, you might wonder what stories will be told about your comeback, your resilience, your refusal to let anyone else define what's possible for you. Even though this moment feels difficult, even though the rejection stings, even though you might be questioning yourself right now, you are in the exact position that every great success story requires, the moment of apparent defeat that becomes the foundation of unprecedented victory. And you may find that years from now, you'll be grateful for this rejection, thankful for this redirection, blessed by this opportunity to discover just how powerful and resilient and absolutely unstoppable you really are. After you leave this conversation, after you step back into your life, you'll notice that something fundamental has shifted within you, that the person who was rejected is not the same person who is now moving forward, that this experience has awakened something in you that was always there but perhaps dormant, and that something is your unshakable knowing that you are worthy, you are capable, you are destined for greatness, regardless of what anyone else thinks or says or decides about you. You might begin to realize that every no is just clearing the path for your yes. Every closed door is just directing you toward the open one. Every rejection is just redirection towards something better, bigger, more aligned with your true potential. And when you really understand this, when this truth becomes part of your cellular structure, you'll never again allow someone else's decision to diminish your determination or define your destiny. I wonder if you can feel it already. That shift from feeling defeated to feeling determined, from feeling rejected to feeling redirected, from feeling diminished to feeling destined. Because a person can choose in any moment to transform their pain into power, their setback into a setup, their rejection into rocket fuel for their dreams. Some people allow rejection to break them, but you're not some people, are you? You're someone who allows rejection to make them, to forge them in the fires of determination, to sculpt them into the kind of person who becomes undeniable, not because they never face obstacles, but because they transform every obstacle into an opportunity. Every setback into a comeback, every rejection into a resurrection of their deepest power and potential. You don't have to know exactly how this is going to unfold. You don't have to see the entire staircase. You just have to take the next step with the absolute knowing that you are moving in the direction of your dreams, that you are becoming the person who achieves those dreams, that you are writing a story that will inspire others to never give up, to keep going, to understand that their current chapter is not their final chapter. It's not necessary to have all the answers right now, but it is necessary to have the one answer that matters most. And that answer is yes. Yes to your potential. Yes to your dreams. Yes to your refusal to let anyone else determine your worth. Yes to becoming so excellent, so skilled, so undeniably talented that the only question becomes not whether you'll succeed, but how magnificently you'll succeed. Before you take another breath, before you move forward into the rest of your life, I want you to make a decision right now that this rejection was the last time anyone gets to decide your value. The last time you'll allow someone else's opinion to shake your foundation. The last time you'll question whether you have what it takes, because you do have what it takes. You've always had what it takes, and now you're going to prove it in ways that will amaze even you. You may not be aware of it yet, but you're about to embark on the most incredible journey of growth and achievement and personal transformation. And this rejection that feels so heavy right now is going to become the lightness of knowing that you are unlimited, unstoppable, and absolutely destined to create something beautiful and meaningful and inspiring with your life. Speaking to yourself now, you can begin to understand that winners aren't people who never get knocked down. Winners are people who never stay down. And as you rise from this moment, as you dust yourself off and step into your power, you're not just recovering from rejection. You're launching into a new level of excellence, determination, and success that will make everything you've experienced worth it. The question isn't whether you're going to make it. The question is how spectacular your success is going to be, how inspiring your story is going to become, how many people you're going to motivate when they hear about how you turned this moment of apparent defeat into the catalyst for your greatest achievements. And something tells me that story is going to be absolutely extraordinary. Please like and follow because you help me get better by letting me help you get better.